Candace Valenzuela, Democratic candidate for the open 24th Congressional District seat. 2 weeks left before Election Day. People are already going to the polls. You turn on the TV and there's lots of back and forth between you and your opponent, accusing each other of being the extreme. So what is your message to the voters about your campaign?
I'm running for Congress to advocate for folks, for working families, because the opportunities that helped me go from being homeless as a kid, living in a kiddie pool outside of an El Paso gas station, to becoming the first in my family to go to college, to becoming the first woman of color on the Carrollton Farmers Branch School Board should be available to everyone. And if we want change in DC, we need to send folks who understand the urgencies that many families are facing right now.
With regards to the coronavirus pandemic, you've criticized Beth Van Duyne for favoring reopening too quickly. Why do you think that is? And at some point, do you still support where we are in the process right now?
Well, I support engaging in the process, and that's where me and my opponent are split. It's not just about closing temporarily and then reopening. It's putting the infrastructure in place so that people can do that safely. That means having testing, tracing, and treating available to most Texans, if not all Texans, making sure that folks have sufficient protective gear when they do go back to work, just like our first responders, just like our folks working in our grocery stores and other essential services. So when we are supposed to reopen, we're supposed to do that with those safety mechanisms in mind. And the Trump administration, cheered on by my opponent, Beth Van Duyne, didn't have any of that in mind when they were trying to send folks headlong into a global pandemic. And my biggest criticism isn't trying to get folks to work. All of us want folks to be at work. It's about trying to put people in danger when they're trying to support their families.
Are you supportive of where we are right now, at least in the state of Texas, as far as is it still reopened too fast, too soon, in your estimation?
I mean, it's more a matter of whether or not we are getting folks the health care and the testing and the tracing and treating that they need. I personally do not want to continue to be inside, but for the most part, aside from very select meetings where I'm wearing masks and observing social distancing, I haven't been able to resume my life. Most of my friends and family members who see a risk in this and known risk, because we are losing thousands of Texans. In fact, I think we've topped 75,000 and counting Texans that we've lost to this global pandemic. Or sorry, not 75,000. 75,000 Texans have contracted coronavirus. We're hitting somewhere like 16,000 Texan lives lost. And it's not a matter of being in a specific place. It's a matter of doing what we need to keep folks safe. And until those steps are taken, we aren't where we need to be.
Do you support Speaker Nancy Pelosi's $2.2 trillion coronavirus relief plan?
I support every portion of our relief plans that are supporting the workers of this district, that are supporting the families of this country. We haven't had enough discussions about where we're supposed to be in terms of making sure that our families get the temporary relief that they need in order to get past this pandemic. And when I get to Congress, I'm going to support everything that invests in our families and our workers and our small businesses first.
But if her plan is 2.2 trillion and you were in Congress, would you vote for it?
I would vote for whatever was effective in getting us back to work safely and getting our economy going. And that means that there has to be our workers in mind first and foremost.
Beth Van Duyne criticizes you for signing a letter by the elected officials to protect America. I guess it was a National Climate Justice sign-on letter that pushes for 100% production of clean, renewable energy and ending permitting of new oil, gas, and coal projects. Texas is the #1 energy state, as you know. Wouldn't this hurt the jobs in Texas and all the jobs that are connected to that?
So citing that, I did that from the lens of a local elected official who lives in Denton County, and I think that fracking within a community needs to be done on the basis of community consent. But all of this is distracting from a couple of things. One, we are energy leaders and we need to remain energy leaders. And we've seen in this past year the instability that can come with the oil and gas industry. And so it's not an either or approach, but it's a both and. Making sure that we do continue our work to preserve that industry or preserve as many of our workers as possible, but also looking to the future of our democratic republic, but our infrastructure. And that means green energy. That means clean energy. We lead in windmill farms, and nobody would expect that of Texas. But now we need to make sure that we are training folks to take on those infrastructural challenges that come with remaining energy leaders. That means that we need to be investing in workers, especially as we've seen record job losses this year, in order to make sure that we are getting folks into well-paying jobs. But she brings all of this up to distract from the fact that she's cheered on the Trump administration as they've fought to revoke the Affordable Care Act, as they've fought to revoke protections for pre-existing conditions and protections that many American families have come to rely upon. And I'm working really hard to make sure, especially during a global pandemic, that people get the healthcare they need.
I do want to ask you about healthcare. Just let me go back one thing on the energy question. Do you support the Green New Deal?
No, but I do recognize that climate change is real, that we do need climate justice, which means that your zip code shouldn't determine your ability to have clean air or clean water, and that we do need to create more well-paying jobs by investing in more green infrastructure. But I'm not signing off on the Green New Deal because I don't necessarily think that all of the goals in there are steeped in the science.
And but for somebody who sees this letter and wonders, what your level of support is for, the transition that you were talking about, because as far as ending permitting of new oil, gas, and coal projects, what would you say to them?
I would say that I'm working hard and invested in the future of this district, this state, and this country. And I know what it's like to need to put food on the table, to keep a roof over your head, and to support your families. And many of the folks working in those industries, my husband used to be one of those folks. My husband worked in the gas industry. I understand how critical it is that families are capable of doing that, but we also need to be mindful of the future of those industries and the sustainability of those industries. And that is the job of a policymaker. And I will be working hard to keep the people in mind, as I am also keeping in mind our environment and our economy.
Regarding healthcare, you and Beth Van Dyne have very different views on, solving the problem, I guess. And one thing that you have said is that earlier, back in June, you said you support Elizabeth Warren's health plan. Does that include Medicare for all or just a public option?
I support the public option. We need to make sure that we have a robust public option that supports people in their ability to have health care. As somebody who's had to work 3 jobs to pay for health care because I had a pre-existing condition and 100% markup on my health insurance, in addition to, from this back injury, physical therapy, pain management, prescription drugs, I understand that many families are straining to make ends meet from simple healthcare problems, trying to pay for insulin, trying to pay for preventative care that would save this country and individual families millions of dollars. And we need to think of that as an investment in people. And that's the approach I'm taking.
Wanted to ask you about police reform. You support ending cash bail. Why is that, and what protections will you have to ensure the public safety so that people who are arrested can't go right back out and reoffend?
So I support the ability, I support ending cash bail because I don't think that nonviolent offenders who just don't happen to have the money to pay to get out of jail should then lose their jobs, lose the ability to connect with their families or to support their families as a result of nonviolent offenses. And I don't see that as something that is particularly supportive of most families. I am also pushing for other kinds of reforms, greater transparency in policing and greater training in bias greater investment in community policing and greater investment in making sure that we have the resources to support our police officers. We are often expecting our police officers, much like our teachers, to solve problems that should have been solved by policymakers from the outset. And as somebody who is the family member of both military and law enforcement, knowing that when those protections for our police officers aren't in place, we're also not protecting our community, is just, well, it's sad, and it's critical that we have people who understand that working for those policies.
I did want to just follow up on the question of cash bail. New York State, as you know, passed a bill, and they passed reform, and they had to go back and make some changes, scale back a little bit a year later. What would you do to ensure that there's something in there to make sure that people can't just, if they're charged and arrested and they are released, that they won't go back out and reoffend? Will there be something in there to prevent that?
I mean, that's part of investing in, well, one, again, making sure that specific offenses are not ones that are eligible for bail, but also making sure that we are investing in the resources that are necessary for these communities. That means mental health services, because a lot of these offenses are due to mental health issues. Social workers, when we're talking about folks with food insecurity and their likelihood to offend. So not just leaving some of these policy problems to police officers is going to help to prevent more offense and put more cost burden on our criminal justice system. These problems are long-standing, and we're not New York, but we can definitely avoid a lot of the mistakes they made by focusing on just one aspect of securing our communities.
One other question I have, and that is, this district, as you know, is rated a toss-up by the Cook Political Report. So what are you doing to try to make sure that your supporters get to the polls and vote?
Well, I am communicating with them as much as possible. I'm on the phone with voters every single day, and it is wonderful to hear the enthusiasm they have about this process. I'm talking to them about getting their families out to vote, getting their friends out to vote, helping them to make their plans. We're communicating with voters through social media, and we've been putting out ads in the DFW market, talking about my service to the district, talking about the coalitions I've built, and talking about the future of Texas's 24th district with the new jobs that we'll create, with the families that we'll support. And I think all of the mediums that we're using to communicate that message is really going to help to not just drive turnout, but to drive enthusiasm about the process for years to come.
Candace Valenzuela, Democratic candidate for the 24th Congressional District. Thank you so much for your time. All the best.